Hurricane Lee is now post-tropical storm Lee as it batters the the southwest coast of Nova Scotia and nearby areas, along with down East Maine with gusty winds and heavy rains and rain all the way back down to Cape Cod. So we'll talk about that and take you through the rest of the weekend and move us into next week. That is all coming up today, this Saturday, the 16th of September, on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Mulch, topsoil, and sand. Salt this coming winter. Mark that down, snow removal guys and gals. And when we have a tropical storm or a hurricane, you need hardware to make sure your house is in good order. Well, head over to Omni, 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
And you can measure your temperature and wind and rainfall amount and all sorts of other things on your Tempest weather station. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned at the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you make any purchases on the Tempest website, whether it's the weather station or any of the other wonderful gadgets, gizmos, and weather fashion that they have, use the coupon code I want a weather station, because deep down inside you do. And if you do, you get
10 big % off.
Yes. All right, here we are. It's Saturday morning, and we're going to start the show off with a special guest, Mr. Rayo. Well, Mr. Rayo's not the special guest. He has the special guest.
Well, Joe, back in my early days of weather, in my early broadcasting career, I was primarily on radio and did a number of radio stations in the northeastern United States, as well as parts of Canada. I did a station in Toronto. I did one in Montreal. And I also did a station in Atlantic Canada in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. And in fact, the call letters of that station, CJLS in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. And I figured, well, since Yarmouth this morning seems to be near the epicenter of post-tropical storm Lee, I thought I'd call up the station, give them a ring and see what's going on over there. And we have on our line here Kevin Northrup, who's manning the facilities at CJLS. Kevin, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Joe. And Joe, thank you so much for having me on.
Kevin, it's been a pretty wild 24 or 12 to 24 hours up in Yarmouth, and I thought you might want to tell all of our viewers on Joe and Joe exactly what's going on there and what you anticipate for excuse me, for the next few hours.
Yeah, it's been wet and wild, I guess is how we can describe it right now, coming off of Yarmouth. Currently, Lee, as of about a half hour ago, it was 90 kilometers southwest of Yarmouth. So we're looking to see it make landfall within the next little while here. And it might make landfall. They're saying it could be just to the west of Yarmouth or down a little bit east towards Shelburne County. And it's bringing with it a lot of wind. We've seen, wind gusts. We felt wind gusts up to 110 kilometers an hour here. Some areas, actually, there's an area in Grand Manan, New Brunswick, the neighboring province here, that had a wind gust of 150 kilometers an hour. So it's really been windy, a lot of rain down here in this area, and people are just kind of concerned about potential internet outages. There have been power outages throughout here. There's well over, at last check here, almost 130,000 people in the province of Nova Scotia without power at this current time, and it's far from done yet.
Kevin, let me clarify. You said 150 or 115 kilometers per hour?
150 kilometers an hour. So
that's 90. That's about 93 miles per hour on the Old English scale. That's pretty ferocious.
It is ferocious. You're right. That's more off the I believe a marine area out that way. But yeah, it's as far as landfall goes, we can anticipate up to 120 gusts here in Yarmouth over the next few hours, and it's I believe the system's picking up just a touch faster than what they had initially predicted. We go by Environment Canada, and they're predicting that, again, those 120 wind gusts could be possible. We've had some sustained winds at around 65 here throughout the morning in Yarmouth, and again, that's expected to pick up a little bit more through the day.
Hey, Kevin, I got a couple of questions for you. First off, how does this compare to your experience with Fiona last year, which of course we know did quite a number on Nova Scotia when it went by? And well, go ahead and answer that first, and then I have another question after that.
Yeah, Fiona, actually, for my area of Yarmouth, it barely touched Yarmouth. So we were lucky and we escaped Fiona, but the wrath of Fiona was felt further up through Halifax. There were so many down trees, so many power outages, damaged homes. It was the worst, though, in Cape Breton, which is at the eastern tip of the province here, Cape Breton Island. They really saw a ton of damage, and even up in Newfoundland, there were even a few homes along the coastline of the Atlantic Ocean that actually went into the ocean. It was so powerful. And there were outages for days, weeks, internet outages at the time, so nobody could get a hold of one another. And, of course, all of that property damage, unprecedented insurance claims for Nova Scotia. So we had that, of course, and then that was back a year ago. And then we had the wildfires in a couple of areas of Nova Scotia, too. So it's been a trying year for Nova Scotia, and this is only adding to it. But the ferocity, I guess, of Fiona is not the same with Lee. Lee's a little bit less, but a lot of coastlines, RCMP here, the police asking people to stay off the roads on coastlines, all the way from Yarmouth up to Guysborough County, which is in the eastern part of Nova Scotia. So people still are taking those precautions. Would
you compare this more to, say, a strong nor'easter type experience that you're having right now versus what Fiona produced?
Yeah, I would say an extremely strong nor'easter. It's classified right now as a post-tropical storm as it's making landfall. They had predicted as a low when it came, but it's intensified a little bit to a post-tropical storm. So obviously it changes quite a bit. Hurricane tracks are pretty unpredictable, and we've just been anticipating landfall here over the next, I would say, hour to 2 hours. We should be really starting to feel more of the effects of Lee, and we'll see what this is really made of.
And my other question is, so Joe and I have been trying to figure out the situation in the Bay of Fundy because of the big tidal changes that occur there. Have you heard anything with regards to what they're thinking they're going to expect and how it relates to, say, the time of the storm landfall or the track and the times of high tide? Have you gotten any insight? Do you have any insight on that?
That could be an issue certainly this evening. We did have a high tide actually this morning, and I was out around some of the coastlines of Yarmouth. So Bay of Fundy is about an hour up from me, but around the coastline of Yarmouth, yeah, it's been the waves are pretty intense, and there was some localized flooding on some roads. But I'm sure everyone is keeping a close eye on the Bay of Fundy. Of course, the world's highest tide there, and what that could produce, and depending on the track of the storm, Digby, Yarmouth, and Shelburne counties here, the Tri-Counties we call them in our listening area, the southwestern tip of Nova Scotia, will certainly be on alert for that. And we're hoping that the damage isn't too intense, and that Lee doesn't bring too much of a punch to this area. But again, we still have to see what it's going to be like when it makes landfall.
I was looking on your Facebook page, Kevin, and from earlier today, somebody took a video for about a half a minute showing all the water that was, I guess, moving from a local river onto a street or whatever. I'm not exactly too familiar with the geography of Yarmouth. I have been to Yarmouth, but it certainly indicates that you were beginning to see some rather serious puddling and flooding in your vicinity.
Yes, in the town of Yarmouth, definitely Water Street, which is obviously the street that's right on the waterfront. That's certainly an area of concern. And that video that I took earlier was up a little bit further, just on the outskirts of town. That area does flood pretty commonly anyway, so I would expect to see some more flooding there. We did have a video as well from Cape Sable Island, which is down further towards Shelburne in the southwestern tip of the province. And that area in particular has been getting hit hard over the last couple of hours. They've been getting some more of some of the bigger waves. Some road washouts are happening there. Haven't heard of any evacuations or anything at this point, but folks that live along the coastline are certainly thinking twice. They don't want to have a disaster. So I'm sure they're keeping a close eye on how things are developing.
Yarmouth right now, Kevin, is 61. Wind speed is southeast at 30 miles an hour, gusting to 44. So that would probably, if it's gusting to 44, it's kilometers probably at, close to somewhere in the high 60s or around 70, I guess. Yeah, 70 kilometers an hour. So you've got some whole gales going on there. I'm just trying to check to see if I have an observation from Sable Island, which I do not. There's some gusts. There's Bacaro Point, which is gusting to 53. But at least as of this moment, most of the gusts that are going on there are under 50 miles an hour. So that's at least somewhat of a plus. They're not as extreme as some of the numbers you mentioned earlier on. I'm just asking if anybody checking to see if anybody on our chat board has any questions. And so far, not seeing anything. But if somebody has a question, they can post it up. Joe, do you have any additional questions for our guest?
Well, Kevin, I saw something like 130,000 people are without power in Nova Scotia. I presume that the radio station that you're at, CJLS, or Y95, as it's popularly referred to in the area around Yarmouth, I would presume that you're on emergency power or on generator power to broadcast to your listeners.
We have that on standby. Luckily, so far, knock on wood, we haven't needed it at this time. But you just never know. The power could go at any time, that's for sure. And I'm looking at the outage map, and there's a pretty large swath just outside of the town of Yarmouth that's lost power, and again down through like Shelburne, Digby Way. There's some power outages through there. Yeah, it's the live outage map which Nova Scotia Power provides online. It's lit up right now with outages. So we're hoping to avoid that here in the town of Yarmouth. Again, it depends on what that wind speed is going to be when Lee does make landfall, which we anticipate over the next little bit.
Kevin, I got two questions from our viewers that are on every day on our chat board on our YouTube channel. Robert Brown is asking about down trees, and you mentioned that with Fiona that was a big deal up around Halifax and points to the northeast. And Sandy Blue Ocean, who's from upstate New York, just wondering in terms of preparation right along the coast, do they need or is there a use for sandbags when preparing for coastal flooding?
I mean, I haven't seen any at this particular time. I've only been around the coast a little bit today, but I'm sure that is a tool that folks are using. The biggest concern, I think, for here, our economy is so driven by fishing and the lobster fishery in this area, and it's not currently fishing season, but a lot of that gear is tied up outside right now, and a lot of boats had to be moved to a more secure location, but captains of those boats are taking extra precautions. They're certainly tying more lines onto their vessels. They want to avoid as much damage as they possibly can, and a lot of vessels were damaged in Shelburne County, believe it or not, during the wildfires, which happened in May and June here in Nova Scotia, unprecedented wildfires here. So they want to avoid another disaster, and we're hoping that our fishers will certainly come through this unscathed.
And I mentioned on our show, Kevin, that many people, when they think of tropical cyclones, usually think of Florida or the Gulf Coast or whatever. But in recent years, it seems like Nova Scotia has been a magnet for these things. And if you've not had a direct hit, you've certainly had a few of these types of storms pass very close to you. All of a sudden, it seems like Nova Scotia. I don't know if it's a product of global warming or climate change or whatever, but you guys have been getting more than your fair share of these type of storm systems.
We sure have. It's been, since 2019 we had Dorian. Hurricane Dorian came up through, and that did quite a number on Halifax and our area too. We experienced a lot of damage with that, a lot of down trees. I am seeing a few down trees. To answer that earlier question, I saw a huge one on one of the main streets here in Yarmouth. So that certainly is a concern, and police are asking people to stay off the roads as well, just to avoid having to go out and potentially, rescue anybody or anything like that. These systems really are becoming more and more common. Like you said, Dorian 2019, Fiona last year, and now with Lee. So, and I can even remember Arthur back in 2014 was another one that was certainly quite damaging to Yarmouth, not even classified as a tropical storm. It was a post-tropical storm when it hit, but it certainly took out a lot of trees here in the Yarmouth area, and we lost power for quite some time. So that could be on our plate today, but it's been looking out the window right now. It's not terrible, but yeah, again, just waiting for that landfall and seeing what the rest of the day looks like as the storm. We're hearing that it's going to last through to the evening and possibly the early parts of tomorrow.
One last question from our chat board birder lady, one of our regulars here. She was just curious about any tropical storm generated tornadoes being reported.
Right. I haven't heard of any tornadoes. Tornadoes, I don't think are very common in this area. I haven't even really heard of one happening in the Tri-County area that I cover since I've been here. I've been here for 20 years. I've no concerns about that, I don't think, right now. But again, with global warming, you never know.
Well, I just want to tell you, Kevin, we really, really appreciate. I told Kevin before we went on, Joe, I said, we'll only have you for about 3 or 4 minutes at most. And here we are now. We're going into our 16th minute with him, and I know things are very, very busy at the radio station. So we're gonna let you go, Kevin. But we thank you for the time that you've given to us and the latest update from Nova Scotia. And we hope all of our viewers online and Joe and I both wish you the best, and we hope that you're able to make a quick recovery from this visitation by Lee that we've been tracking really for the better part of the last week. I mean, last Saturday.
Last 2 weeks.
2 weeks. One of the amazing things about this storm is the fact that the computer models, which aren't always the best when they go out more than a few days, this particular storm, we've been tracking this, and we've been saying from a week ago, it looks like Nova Scotia was like in the crosshairs, and sure enough, on a day-to-day basis, we saw that thing inching closer and closer to you, but it's there now. It seems like you're making the best of it, and we hope that you get through this with no real major problems.
Well, Joe and Joe, thank you so much for that, and we'll certainly look to make the best of it and bring the information to our listeners the best way we can.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Good luck.
Take care.
Bye. All right. Well,
yeah.
there you go.
Well, while Kevin was up there, the latter part had the satellite loop that shows Canada and the northern half of the United States. You get a clear view on the right of post-tropical cyclone Lee. There's still a little bit of what looks like some convection, a little core of convection. I know they made it post-tropical this morning. I mean, it's just a technical designation. It really doesn't matter in terms of the outcome, but I can at least still seem to pick out what I think is the center, and it's just now, very relatively close to the south, that coastline. I know it was at the southwest coast of Nova Scotia, but it's still sort of pinning up toward the northwest. So there's probably some issues going on in Down East Maine. I saw one of our New Brunswick, Canada guy who's on the other side of Holton, Maine, on the chat board. Joe said he had, hasn't been too bad where he is, but they did have power outages there. I'm just looking at some observations here, which I've got on the screen, but I lost my mouse. So let's see. Oh, there we go. There is a buoy out in the Gulf of Maine offshore where they've got it sustained at 40, gusting to 51. The wind is north there. Okay, and I'm looking at the winds along the south coast of Nova Scotia. They're mostly southeast or east-southeast. A few gusts in the mid-40s. Yarmouth is gusting to 44. Right now, Baccaro Point is gusting to 50. I want to see if Sable Island, because that's out there. Be kind of curious, but I don't see the plot here on the map, so maybe they're not reporting. But back on coastal Maine, going down the coast of Maine, most of the gusts, at least right now, are in the 20 to 30 mile an hour range. When I first brought this map up about half an hour ago, I saw some mid and high 40s, so there's just a bit of a lull. There's another buoy here at Metanicus Rock, which is out in the Gulf of Maine. 48 mile an hour wind speed, gusting to 55. 59 is the temperature there, and then further down the coast, some gusts in the mid and high 30s. Buoys just offshore with gusts into the 40s. I'm looking down near Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and heading kind of maneuvering my way down the coast here toward Cape Cod, waiting for the numbers to load, which they're getting that circle of death. Round and round and round it goes. Come on, folks, load it up.
And if you give me the share capabilities, Joe, we can show some radar for you.
All right, you know what? I'll do that. And why don't you do the radars, and then I can set up a couple of other things here.
And it's interesting that it's a post. It's not a hurricane or tropical. It's a post-tropical system. It's going as what we say extra-tropical, and yet you heard about all of the problems that they're going through in Nova Scotia with over 100,000 people without power and the flooding and whatnot. It kind of reminds me of when, we get like a 12 or 14-inch snowstorm here in the New York area, and the meteorologists will come on and say, well, it's not officially a blizzard. We didn't have winds of 35 miles per hour for 3 consecutive. And, does that really matter to somebody who has like a foot of snow in front of his house and he's got to get to work and clear all of that away, that it's not officially a blizzard? No. The same way with the Nova Scotians, people in western Nova Scotia who are going to be dealing for many days now with possibly no power and flooding and what the meteorologist. Well, it wasn't officially a hurricane. Yeah,
it doesn't. Everybody they get wrapped up in the technicalities of it. You've got the share. I'm just looking just real quick along the coast in and around Boston. It's mostly 20 to 30 on the winds. On the Cape, it's 30 to maybe some gusts into the 40s. We've got a couple of places with some gusts up into the 40 mile an hour range, like. There's a station that's about halfway out on the Cape that's gusting right now to 40. What is it? No, now the peak gust to 43, and Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, gusts there upper 30s and low 40s. I mean, they've certainly seen far worse in nor'easters, let alone in a tropical cyclones. Anyway, you got the wheel there, so go ahead and check out the radars.
We're starting all the way at the top of Maine, actually. This is the radar from Caribou Holton area, and you can see a couple of things. Number one, that the motion of the precipitation is moving from east to west. You could see quite notably one significant spiral band here that is moving in from the coast. Now, right here, where you can see my cursor, here's the Bay of Fundy. This off here is Nova Scotia, western Nova Scotia. I chose this because this probably gives us about as good a view of Nova Scotia as any of the radars that we're going to be taking a look at in the next few moments. But you can see that the heavy rains apparently are not occurring, or that they're lifting away to the north and northwest over the Bay of Fundy. And actually, at least in this area, in extreme northern and western Nova Scotia, the worst of the rain has, for the moment, quit. So, but you can see that main band is moving in through down East Maine and now into, it appears, central sections of the state of Maine. So let's move down the coast now to Portland, Maine. And you can see here now Portland is Portland or Gray, Maine right here. And for the most part, southwestern Maine has really not seen all that much. Here's Lewiston, Maine, which is where the Farmer's Almanac is published, and they're not seeing very much. So it appears that you have to go to the immediate east and north of Portland in order to get into the heavy-duty rain activity. Here's that one rain band that I just pointed out that we saw on the Caribou radar, and this is, again, moving from east to west. And so what probably is going to happen is that this area of moderate or heavy rain is going to be just about reaching the outskirts of Portland and then just either falling apart or just falling short. So if you live in Maine, areas in the southern and western sections are not really seeing all that much in terms of precipitation. Interestingly, though, there are bands of rain that are making it down from north to south across New Hampshire. They're seeing some rain there, but again, not all that much in southwestern sections of Maine. Let's try Boston and see what they're showing. And you could see that in Boston, the eastern sections of Massachusetts, Cape Cod, looks like they really got hit a couple of hours ago, because the main area of rain here, sweeping around the backside of Lee, is now sweeping on and offshore. And whatever rain has occurred over Massachusetts apparently is clearing away a bit for them. Here's Cape Cod, and again, here's Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. So they're seeing their fair share. Now, of course, here in the immediate New York area, you're wondering about extreme eastern Long Island. Here's Montauk Point, and it looks like the rain has just barely missed the Montauk and east end of Long Island, although Block Island seems to be getting a few showers, but it looks like Long Island, at least as of up until about 2 or 3 hours ago, was fairly dry. Now, you notice at the beginning of the loop that the rain starts just to the south of the south coast of Suffolk or eastern Suffolk County. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility that perhaps earlier on in the morning, like at West Hampton or East Hampton or any place there, they might have had a few widely scattered showers. But right now, it looks like all of Long Island is pretty much out in the clear. Let me just see if I can pick one more here. I'll pick Albany for the heck of it. And you can see, yeah, Albany showing not much of anything. In eastern New York, everything seems to be, again, to the right or to the east of the Connecticut River area. Right here is Interstate 91. It goes right along the Connecticut River. So you can see that every place that's to the right or to the east of that is where they're getting rain from Lee. But in most of Vermont, central and western Massachusetts, most of Connecticut, except for extreme eastern sections, are out in the clear and is dry too, as well as here in eastern New York. I can tell you, Joe, that outside my window here in Putnam Valley, 55 miles north of Manhattan, we have mid to high level cloudiness, some sunshine showing through, a bit of a breeze, but it's been dry, and it looks like it will continue to remain dry right on through the rest of the day and on into the day tomorrow.
A couple of our chat board members, I just want to say thank you to a New Brunswick, Canada guy for providing observations where he is on the New Brunswick side of Holton, Maine. And Michael Brown, who is in Halifax, saying there is flooding there at high tide at the harbor. The harbor looks more than full with white caps all over the place. And also hello to B. Hillen. I hope I got that. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He's in Rockland, Maine, saying that the winds there have been letting up just a bit. Power outages in mid-coast Maine, but nothing too extreme. Thank you for that. And always it's always good to share your information. You can do that on the chat board. Welcome to everybody to this Saturday Joe and Joe Weather Show, and welcome to those of you who are new and those of you who are just watching in the background. I hope you're enjoying it. If you like the show, hit the like button. It makes us happy to get 100 likes. I don't know if we're going to do that today, but nonetheless, I've got the Joe. The one thing I would not want to be right now is the forecaster with the responsibility of figuring out what's going to happen in the Bay of Fundy, because you're threading such a fine needle, and I've got the close-up satellite loop up on the screen. You should see it momentarily. The center is actually, I pretty well can pick it out from the visible satellite loop, and it is offshore, and it looks like it's moving northwestward or northwestward still. We expected that to happen, that it would do a bit of a left hook. And fortunately for the areas from eastern Pennsylvania, for New Jersey, for Long Island, and southeastern New England, even though you're certainly getting weather from this, that the hook is happening further north, and not so lucky for the folks in the Gulf of Maine, particularly the eastern part of Maine and into Nova Scotia. But that's got to be a tough forecast, because you've got to time out the tides. I don't have any clue on the way it works up there with the tides, with those, they come in so quickly and then go out so quickly. So that's got to be a real tough forecast to figure out.
It's funny. It looks like the storm is doing a zigzag. It doesn't. I know that Kevin had mentioned that they were anticipating a landfall near Yarmouth, but it appears, but the way we can see of the eye on the satellite picture, that it appears it's trying to zig right along the immediate west coast of Nova Scotia, and then will zag into the Bay of Fundy. It's quite possible that we may not get much of any landfall for a while, because it seems to be trying to avoid making a landfall either along the extreme eastern coast of Maine or even the extreme west coast of Nova Scotia. It just seems to want to go into the Bay of Fundy.
Yeah, and you know what? If it doesn't make that turn to the right soon, it's supposed to. It's going to come close, though. At least the center is going to come close to down East Maine, right near the U.S. Canada border.
Yeah, in fact, I was debating whether or not we would call either Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, or maybe a place in Maine. Now, I'm not sure. Is it Machias or Machias, Maine?
I don't know.
That's a town. That's a town that's immediately to the left or to the west of Eastport, Maine. Eastport, I guess, is as far east as you can go in the state of Maine. But in any case, we chose Yarmouth instead, and got the latest from them. But I'm sure that down East Maine too is. Well, we just saw that there were some power outages from one of our viewers on the chat board, but nothing that really they can't handle or have not been able to handle. It's not, let's put it this way, it's a bad storm, but it's not cataclysmic as far as, let's say, Nova Scotia or even down East Maine is concerned. A bad storm, it's not one where they're going to be out for, many, many, many weeks. It'll be obviously something they'll have to deal with over the next several days, but it's not anything that I don't think that and I'm sure that power companies from around the Northeast will be gravitating both to down East Maine and also to Nova Scotia. I know, Joe, that here in Putnam Valley, when we had the winter of the Four Easters back, I think in 2018, and my power here locally was out for like 3 or 4 days, that I actually had my power hooked back up again by people from Atlantic Canada. They came down and helped us. And I'm sure that we'll be sending folks from here in the United States, northeastern states, to help the folks in Nova Scotia after all this is over, said and done, too.
The Hurricane Center is still doing advisories, but as post-tropical cyclone Lee. Again, technicality. I happen to think that I'm starting to really think that they're well, I don't know. When they declare it post-tropical, insurance companies have to pay and cannot exercise the hurricane deductibles, which are now in everybody's homeowners policies. For those of you who live up and down the coast, you should know that all too well in your homeowners policy. If you don't, you should read your homeowners policy. This might be a good time to do that if you're outside this storm area, because oftentimes, when there's a tropical cyclone, if your damage is caused by a tropical cyclone, you might have a $500 or $1,000 deductible, but the hurricane deductible kicks in, and it could be up to 10-15% of the value of the market value of your home. So if you've got a $500,000 home, let's say, which in the Northeast, is certainly not uncommon, or actually throughout much of the country these days, it's not uncommon. But if you've got a $500,000 home, your deductible is now $50,000. So by making it post-tropical before it makes landfall, these hurricane deductibles aren't exercised. So if you come away from anything today by watching this show, might want to pull out your homeowner's policy and read up on that. So this way, you know what's going on, just in case wherever you are, you might one day be threatened by a tropical cyclone or a hurricane.
And you reminded me of an incident that happened during Hurricane Sandy. My news director, Janine Rose, we were, of course, doing wall-to-wall live coverage about the storm. And literally just before the storm made landfall in central New Jersey, I came on with the latest intermediate advisory, and I said, well, this is not a hurricane anymore. It's post-tropical storm Sandy. And the look on my news director's face, Janine Rose, he said, well, what the heck does that mean? I said, well,
I think most people say that.
I mean, and I said, this could have implications for those people who are, getting damage from the storm, that it's no longer a hurricane. It is now extratropical or post-tropical. And as you just explained, Joe, this could have a significant impact on just how much the deductible is, or how much you got to pay out or pay in or whatever. And he continued to call it Hurricane Sandy. I said, well, again, it's not officially a hurricane. That's what we said about 10 and 15 minutes ago. It's causing damage left and right, but it's not officially a hurricane.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a technical designation that the weather folks will will understand, but the average person, you go from talking about it as a tropical cyclone, and all of a sudden it's no longer a tropical storm or a hurricane. It's a post-tropical cyclone. They used to at least call it extratropical cyclone. Now then they went to the nomenclature of post-tropical. Birder lady, I'm trying to answer your question, and my typewriter is suddenly, I'm not my typewriter. My keyboard has suddenly decided that it's not. I put in the numbers and it's putting out all sorts of different characters. So she asked Joe about the diameter of the storm and how large it is. If you go by the gales, which is probably the best, I would say probably 450 to 500 miles. I think at one point yesterday, if you added the gales on the east side and the gales on the west side, you came up with a number that was pretty close to 500. I mean, it was pretty large. I mean, certainly from that respect. And you can see the blue area, by the way. All of Maine is under tropical storm warnings. The tropical storm warnings for Massachusetts have been discontinued. Tropical storm warnings for all of Nova Scotia, including Prince Edward Island, and also the coastlines of New Brunswick, both the coastline in the Bay of Fundy, as well as the coastlines that face the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And you see the track there is toward northwestern, through southern New Brunswick, northwestern Newfoundland. So the Hurricane Center is expecting that right turn with a landfall somewhere in New Brunswick sometime later this afternoon, and then on its way to the northeast into the Atlantic Graveyard. Let's look at the GFS because there's always criticism, Joe, about how these models, how good they are, or how good they aren't. And you brought this up earlier when you were speaking with Kevin. The GFS, I think, did an amazing job here in the long range, where at 198 hours out, and I remember this very clearly, 198 hours out, it started zeroing in on Nova Scotia. I mean, the models did wobble along the way, and we were talking about small wobbles that potentially could have had big impacts for southeastern New England, for southern New England, for Long Island. But if you take those out, and the European had a few more of those models, those wobbles than the GFS did. But the GFS said Nova Scotia, just pointed to Nova Scotia, and that's pretty much where it's wound up. So that's pretty remarkable, eight or 9 days out, to have to hit it like that.
Absolutely. In fact, as you're speaking, I have actually the GFS forecasts spread apart by one. I want to just show you. I'm just trying to put them side by side so that
all right. I'm gonna switch you so you can show it on the screen here. Hang on a second.
Right. I'm still working on this though. Let me see Lee. I've got so many Lee files now. Okay, this is okay. So that's one.
All right, you put it together. I'm just going to run through this GFS new run that's come out because it's kind of interesting. So Lee does what it does, and of course, if you're in between the rain that's in parts of Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee today, and the rain that is going on with the post-tropical cyclone, you're actually enjoying some pretty nice weather. Oddly enough, in fact, I got the GO satellite just to show you here. The clouds have kind of backed. They're on the thin side in New Jersey and over New York City and by you. The heavier overcasts are to the east, but you can see that the clouds did back a ways pretty far west, and they're still sort of pushing down southwestward into New Jersey. But southern New Jersey is bright and sunny. Eastern Pennsylvania, bright and sunny. Much of upstate New York, except the eastern part of the state, is mostly sunny. Sunny skies down through Virginia, North and South Carolina. Of course, I'm sitting in clouds and watching some rain coming in from the west. And, who knows, late tonight or tomorrow, I think we're probably going to see a couple of thunderstorms running around. But this is going to pull out. We've got a cold front that is moving east tomorrow, and unusual that this front is, for the time of year anyway, but there's a wave on that front down in western North Carolina by tomorrow afternoon. And as the front slows down near the coast, a wave develops off the North Carolina coast and moves northeast with an area of rain for Monday. I mean, by Monday, Monday evening still showing rain back north and west of the coast. So a little bit of a change here with the forecast. Tomorrow, I think, should be okay until maybe late afternoon or evening. And then we're going to have a front with a wave on it, believe it or not. Then that goes by, and of course it dries out after that with a nice high building in. Temperatures are going to be on the, seasonal side for this time of year in the 70s. If you look on the far right, you can see the edge of what will probably be Hurricane Nigel by Wednesday, 4 days from now, passing to the east of Bermuda. So for a change, we're getting a storm going to the east of Bermuda. But just want to call your attention, because the models have been showing this for the last couple of days in different ways. But we do have a ridge in the east that's going to try and build and troughing off the southeast coast with an upper low. And the GFS does show some sort of, tropical or subtropical low that develops sometime next weekend off the Florida coast, moving northward into North Carolina and then shooting northward from there up the east side of the Appalachians. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of this. In the coming days. You're going to have a big high that's going to be to our north pretty much all week long. So that's one ingredient to all of this. But the Canadian's been showing this, and even the European model has been picking up on the idea that something might try to develop off the southeast coast of the United States later this week.
Yeah, and speaking of the rain tomorrow night into Monday, I noticed that on the Foose, the the Nam-Foos, they were kind of indicating initially we could be seeing something like a half or even maybe as much as an inch at LaGuardia or at the White Plains. But the last time I looked at the Foos, the latest run, the 12Z run, they kind of knocked that back now to only about a quarter of an inch. So they've kind of taken away a lot of the moisture that we may see tomorrow night and Monday morning with this next round of rain. So it'll be interesting to see how much. Now you have on the screen. This is pretty interesting. This is the GFS. The GFS's handling of Hurricane Lee. The image that you see on the left is the 180-hour prog. This goes all the way back to last weekend, Joe. And the one on the right is the one that I picked out yesterday on the GFS, only 30 hours from the apparent landfall or close to landfall.
That's pretty remarkable.
Look at the differences. What differences? They are almost. It's amazing. The only thing that differs really is in terms of the speed. Now this is 18Z Saturday. This is just about right now, or coming up in about an hour from now. I mean, look at that position. I mean, how much closer can you get than this? And this is 8 a.m. for Saturday. This is from this morning. Joe, practically, this is really, really incredible. This was valid as of 0Z September the 9th. So this goes back, like, again, 180 hours, September the 9th. This is the GFS from yesterday. I mean, look at the difference. There's hardly any difference. You talk about nailing at least a path, and even to some degree the speed of this storm. The GFS did a very, very admirable job in doing so. It really had.
That's remarkable. It really is remarkable how close it was, and it was by itself for a while going to Nova Scotia, because the other models, particularly the Canadian was taking this way out to the east for the longest time. I mean, it took a long time for the Canadian model to catch up. The European initially was doing the same thing, and then it started to figure out that, well, no, that's not going to happen. It's going to be further to the west. Like I said, people, weather folks are easy to jump on the fact that the models, and I really don't understand, and I've had this conversation with a number of people to try to explain that you're looking at the models all wrong. The models are not there to give you the exact spot.
The guidance.
They're there to guide you on a possibility. And at the end of the day, what matters is that your forecast is right. Not that the models are right, but if the forecast is right. If the models are right, then that's great. That's wonderful. But if you're the one making the forecast and the models, you pick up on the idea that the models are not doing something correctly, that you think it's going to be something other than that, and you wind up being right, that's what matters. That's right. What matters. Anybody can look at a model map and make a forecast based on that. And you know what? If you do that, more often than not, you're going to be, in the long range anyway, more often than not, you're going to be wrong. You're going to be wrong about something. And you might be wrong about something in a small way, but you might be wrong, more than likely you might be wrong on something on a big way. So, kudos to the GFS on this.
Well, as I said, I gave a talk. In fact, it was the library talk I gave a few nights ago, which is why we were delayed until 8:30. And in that talk, I mentioned the importance. I said it's wonderful the way technology is now, that it's able to guide us and show us things such as what's on your screen right now. But it's always important also to mix in the human element, man-machine mix. Don't go straight with the machine, because the machine, especially once you go beyond 5 days, usually it's not correct. You have to make some adjustments. So the good old human being, so far as I'm concerned, is still going to be important in weather forecasting for a good long time, until we somehow manage to get these machines to get it exact. And I don't think that's ever going to happen in our lifetime. But kudos to the GFS and other models, too, for really handling the path and speed of this particular tropical system more than a week in advance, as we've just seen.
And I've got the I think I got the GFS upper air up. Good. That's what I wanted to show. So just backtracking from yesterday, Thursday and yesterday, you can see Lee responding to this lead trough that was moving across the northeast. You see it right there, and here is Lee, or was Lee, southwest of Bermuda. And on the upper left, you see the indentation there of another trough, and that's the player today. As we move through Friday and Saturday, that first trough pulled out. Lee was just kind of got caught on by it enough to gain enough latitude that it just kept on moving northward. And then the next trough dropping down, which it's doing today in the western lakes and down into the Mississippi Valley, acts as the, basically the one side of the seesaw that goes down, and then the other side of the seesaw goes up, and Lee pushing up into Atlantic Canada. This upper trough, and of course it's actually a fairly deep upper trough at this time of year, is probably a low, an upper low is somewhere in West Virginia Monday morning, with this wave that's developing along the coast. In fact, it cuts off in central Pennsylvania tomorrow afternoon as it lifts out to the northeast. Now, once that goes by, we're going to be sort of on the edge of these northwesterly winds in the upper atmosphere, but there's a weakness. There's sort of a broad trough from a closed low in Iowa, and you see it here. This is our closed low in Iowa, okay? But that weakness extends all the way down into the southeastern part of the U.S. And on the far right, east of Bermuda, you see what will probably be Hurricane Nigel. So that's going to recurve and go up and out. You got these northwesterly winds in the upper atmosphere in the northeast, down into the northern mid-Atlantic states. That's going to be far enough south to pick up Nigel and get it out of the way. But this weakness here is something that I think we're going to have to pay attention to, because you start to see the formation of an upper low off the Florida coast by Thursday night and Friday. And from this is where you wind up with what could possibly be some sort of tropical or subtropical system that develops off the southeast coast of Florida and then heads up northward from there. And it's not that far away either, Joe. We're talking next weekend. We're not talking 2 weeks from now. We're talking next weekend.
Right. That'll be interesting to see what some of the other models, especially the European, how this is handling it. And, what we always say, the trend is your friend. And if it's trending toward some kind of a closed system, both aloft and at the surface, in the days to come, you're absolutely right. It'll be something to watch, for next weekend. Next weekend is what? Next weekend
This is the last weekend of the summer.
Right, exactly. So we have the first weekend of fall next weekend, and so, not very fall-like if you're going to be dealing with a potential subtropical or tropical system up here in the Northeast.
Yep. Totally. A new season begins, Joe. As everybody is saying about now, the summer went fast. Every summer goes fast.
Yes.
Every autumn goes fast. Winter, not so much. Winter seems to, especially when you get into, if you have a rough January, when you get into February, a lot of times you're at the point where you want it to be over with. So, but the summers usually do fly by because most people are having a good time. And when you have a good time, summers go by quick. Now, if you have to work outside, that's a different story.
Sometimes when you have very cold and snowy Januaries, and I'm going to invoke now a Dvoskinism here in honor of our good friend from News 12, Norm Dvoskin. He'd say in those kind of winters, you're not January, you're January.
Yes, well, that's quite true. That is quite true. All right, let's wrap it up here. Thanks everybody for taking time on your Saturday afternoon. Now we're coming up on the 1 o'clock hour Eastern time. So Joe and I are going to take tomorrow off. So we are going to be back Monday at 7:35 p.m. And of course, if you really need a weather fix, you can always check out my website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com, or my subscription site, which is on Patreon, patreon.com/meteorologistjoecioffi. And if you're one of our regulars on YouTube and you subscribe to my YouTube channel, I'll probably put up a weather in 5 and a weather in a minute or a minute and a half, as it happens to be, tomorrow. So you won't be totally without it. Okay. So we'll see everybody on Monday at 7:35 p.m.
Yes, and thanks again to our friend in Nova Scotia at CJLS, Kevin Northrup. It was nice to connect with CJLS again after 30 years. I can tell you, Joe, when I was doing the weather for that station in the 1990s, they didn't have any of this kind of stuff. But it's a different world and a different story and a different environment apparently now, as opposed to it was back in the 90s. But it was fun talking to Yarmouth. Let's hope that they get through all this, and we'll see you on Monday.
Bye-bye, everybody.